Hello and a very good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Here are the latest headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Brisbane, Australia for the G20 summit starting tomorrow. He asked for sustained dialogue among all stakeholders at the East Asia summit in Myanmar. India-US agreement at the WTO on public stockpiling of food paves the way for implementation of the long-stalled global trade facilitation deal. Army court sentences 5 army personnel to life imprisonment in the 2010 Machil fake encounter case in Jammu and Kashmir. Islamic State looks to squash rumours of the killing of its leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, releases a voice message claimed to be that of Baghdadi, vowing to fight to the last man. And opener Rohit Sharma smashes Virender Sehwag's record with 264 in just 173 balls against Sri Lanka. He is now the only cricketer with 2 double hundreds in limited overs cricket. Our top focus on the bulletin this morning. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Brisbane in Australia, beginning the second leg of his 3-nation tour, where he is to attend the G20 summit of 20 of the world's developed and developing economies. Modi arrived in Brisbane a short while back from Myanmar. Several world leaders from Brazil, Argentina, Saudi Arabia and other countries have already arrived in the city, the venue of the G20 summit. Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Australia since Rajiv Gandhi in 1986. At the G20 summit to be held tomorrow and on Sunday, the Prime Minister is expected to voice concerns over jobless growth and stress that economic growth should also create employment. The G20 looks to meet a 2% increase to its combined growth over 5 years through economic reform and infrastructure investment. The Prime Minister left Myanmar last night after the East Asia summit. Modi had asserted in KP Tour that the world community must reject any linkage between religion and terrorism while formulating a genuinely international partnership in the fight against all forms of terror acts. Joining me for a chat this morning is former Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee. Good morning, Ambassador, and thank you for joining me on the program. Let's talk about Narendra Modi's second leg now, of course. He was in Myanmar before. Right. He's reached Brisbane. What is it can we expect from Narendra Modi's 5-day visit to Australia?
Well, to begin with this visit to Brisbane for the G20 summit. Now, let's, as a matter of fact, I think the G20 is probably one of the most important international bodies of which India is a member. I would even go so far as to put it that it is much more important for India to engage with the G20 meaningfully than even the annual journey to address the General Assembly of the UN, which has almost reduced itself to a talking shop quite often. The G20 members have 85% of the world's GDP.
Yes.
It has 75% of global trade. So, I mean, the importance is self-evident. And the second point is that the G20 started as something, as a group of countries to resolve the crisis that hit the world in 2008, and the financial tsunami hit the world.
Yes, yes.
But today, it's gone above that role into a group of countries that dominate the world economically and are looking at ways of sustained economic growth. So it's an institution with which we must engage in a long-term, meaningful fashion. This year's agenda is very, very important. Almost all the agenda items are very important for India. Infrastructure investment, jobs leading to skills, development of skills leading to jobs.
Jobs, yes.
Reform of the international trading system, but not on terms which are hurtful to our national interest. And I'll come to that in a moment. Also, reforming the world's financial architecture, in which a signal has already been given by India as a member of BRICS.
Yes.
You remember the signals that came out of BRICS. So these are major agenda items which will affect the livelihood of every Indian.
Yes, indeed.
So, and Prime Minister Modi goes there with, I think, 2 distinct advantages. One, in general terms, as a leader of 1.2 billion people, who is now known the world over as committed to free trade, committed to business, the Make in India campaign, which has made it very clear corporate-friendly, growth-friendly, and so on. Secondly, in specific terms, he's going just a couple of days after the impasse on the WTO and the Trade Facilitation Agreement seems to have been over. The details are still, the fine details are still not available, but it is clear that there has been an agreement under which India's insistence that its food security necessity as a nation should be addressed has been addressed. Earlier, if you remember, we were told that you accept WTO, the Trade Facilitation Agreement as it is, with the 10% cap on subsidy, and in 3 years' time we'll sort things out. So the onus was on India, which is ridiculous.
Yes.
Now the proposal still remains on the table, but the ability of any country that demands food security in its national interest is a given until such time as a permanent solution is found. So onus is now on the international community in the WTO, which is fine. We are not now constrained to move away from our national interest in having a food security program.
Yes.
So these two things bring Prime Minister Modi to the table in a very positive kind of way.
And the little fact that the BJP has complete majority here in India also, suggests that the world leaders want to talk to Narendra Modi. He's the most sought-after leader in Australia at the moment. It's not Barack Obama, it's not Tony Abbott, or it's not anybody else, but it's Narendra Modi whom the world is looking forward to right now.
Well, I wouldn't, I wouldn't get into hubris of that kind. Yes, certainly it has reached worldwide notice about the role of the Prime Minister, the fact that India has now a very solid, stable majority government, which is committed to economic growth, which is committed to policies which are liberal in economic terms, which is engaging with globalization and not harking back to the old days of protectionism and so on. So that, of course, is a factor. But more than that, I think it is the evidence that Prime Minister Modi and his government have given that they will walk the talk that is really going to make his engagement with this G20, his first G20 summit,
his first G20
a very successful one. I have no doubts about that. As far as the visit to the bilateral part of the visit is concerned, it is, again, a very significant part of his program. You see, Australia is geopolitically very important. It is seen, and rightly I think, as a sort of a Western outpost in Asia.
Yes.
It is part of the Western Alliance, but it is located in such a way that it has a player in Asia as well. We have had links with Australia for a long time, good relations, which went sharply down when we did our nuclear tests in 1998.
Yes.
When when Australia was one of our sharpest critics. From there to now, where just 3 months ago Tony Abbott visited, and we have a civil nuclear deal with Australia about the supply of uranium for our civil nuclear program, is really a huge positive achievement for the diplomacy of both sides, not just India, but Australia as well. We have issues of energy to discuss. We have issues of security, the security of sea lanes. And yes, we do have, I don't know how long it will take or whether they will discuss this at length, but certainly in the backdrop is going to be the elephant in the room, which is China. Prime Minister of Australia has already said that all this talk about a four-country alliance of India, Japan, Australia, and to contain China is not really correct. That Australia has space in its policy for both China and India, with both of whom it considers its relations very important. But the fact is that while he may be, while the rhetoric is correct, but behind that there is absolutely no doubt that potentially the grouping of India, Japan, US and Australia is something that can be looked at as as a counter to China's aggressive moves in this part of the world.
All right. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us on the program this morning and sharing your thoughts on that very subject. Moving on now, the centre said that it has agreed to an indefinite peace clause on food security with the United States, so a public food stock holding for food security. This means a go-ahead for the landmark trade facilitation agreement that India had refused to sign, linking it to the issue of rural poverty in the country. Here's a detailed report.
The standoff has finally ended. On Thursday, India signalled the WTO trade facilitation deal could now go ahead.
We are extremely happy that India and the United States of America have successfully resolved their differences relating to the issue of public stock holding for food security purposes in the WTO in a manner that addresses our concerns.
The trade facilitation deal was stalled because India wanted to keep a peace clause that protected its food procurements and food security concerns till the WTO struck a definitive deal. India's present proposal will now be reviewed by the WTO General Council next month.
We urge the WTO membership to take this forward in the General Council on behalf of the Ministerial Conference and pave the way to spurring the WTO to much more such successes.
The left, however, asked the government to reveal the terms it has agreed on the trade facilitation agreement.
We don't know what India has agreed to, because the USA is very clear they want unbridled access to our agricultural markets.
In the December 2013 Bali conference, India expressed concerns that agreeing to trade protocols could compromise its food security plans. The WTO agreement removes trade barriers but caps food subsidies to 10% of total food grain production. India objected to the calculation of subsidies that took 1986 as the base year and completely ignored inflation and currency fluctuation. India agreed to the facilitation agreement in Bali only under the condition that developing nations will get interim relief and face no sanctions till 2017. The present agreement between India and US comes just before the G20 summit this month that will see the presence of both US President Barack Obama and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. WTO says the trade accord could add $1 trillion to global GDP and create 21 million jobs by cutting down red tape. However, it argues that if developing nations continue giving high prices to their farmers, it would be unfair for farmers in the other parts of the world. But with its Food Security Act, India has little scope to jeopardize its own food security. Reporting from Delhi, Kriti Mishra for Rajya Sabha Television.
Moving on now, Punjab and South Carolina may soon be exchanging their best practices. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is ready to take the initiative to sell Carolina as a profitable investment. Haley, who is on a visit to India, met Punjab Deputy Chief Minister Sukhbir Singh Badal and told him that she would support Punjab in establishing aerospace, pharma, tourism and agro-processing industries. She spoke of her deep-rooted links with Punjab from where her parents had immigrated to the US in the 1960s. Haley committed to arranging visits of Indian business leaders to the US to push for investment in agriculture and automobile sectors. Well, there's been a landmark verdict in the 2010 Machil fake encounter case. An army court has sentenced 5 army personnel, including 2 officers, to life imprisonment. Political leaders have hailed the verdict, with the Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah calling it a watershed moment. All the soldiers and officers involved were found guilty of conspiracy, murder and falsely describing the victims as terrorists. The verdict comes 4 years after the killing sparked widespread protests in Jammu and Kashmir. The killing of 3 Kashmiri boys was passed off as an anti-militancy operation by the army.
इनको अपने वो बेटे याद आते हैं, रोज रोते हैं। हम बहुत खुश हुए हैं कि इनको उम्र कैद हुआ है।
The people who have been crying hoarse against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act on the plea that this act gives a blanket sanction and the army men are let loose and nobody is actually punished is a slap on their face. They should notice this. It is not the first time. Army in the past also has punished its guilty members.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has expressed concern on the Chhattisgarh sterilization deaths, calling the incident a grave tragedy. The death toll due to botched operations has risen to 15, with the 2 more women succumbing to illness. The Chhattisgarh government has ordered a judicial probe. A doctor who had conducted surgeries on 83 women has been arrested. The chief medical officer of Bilaspur has been suspended. The government has also banned 6 drugs given to the women, suspecting they were spurious. Samples of the drugs will be sent for testing. Health Minister JP Nadda has said that the centre has set no targets for sterilisation and promised all help.
इंक्वायरी करने के बारे में हमने निर्णय लिया है और आज हम चीफ जस्टिस साहब से बात करके और एक जुडिशियल इंक्वायरी हमने आदेश जारी किया है। ये विषय आज नहीं है कि इस्तीफा देने से सब चीज का समाधान हो जाएगा।
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come on the show, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's birth anniversary celebrations today as Children's Day events have been planned across the country. That and much more. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Back, you're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, it's Children's Day today, the 125th birth anniversary of India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. The President, Vice President, Congress Party Chief Sonia Gandhi and Party Vice President Rahul Gandhi and other dignitaries paid floral tributes at his Samadhi at Shantiwan in Delhi early this morning. A function to pay tribute to Pandit Nehru will be held at 10:30 a.m. in the Central Hall of Parliament House. In other events, Home Minister Rajnath Singh will visit the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library to inaugurate the commemoration of Nehru's 125th birth anniversary. Later in the day, President Pranab Mukherjee will present national awards to children for exceptional achievement and awards of outstanding work for the welfare and development of children.
At the event to mark the 125th birth anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Congress leadership was in full attendance, underscoring the fact that modern India owes its secular fabric solely to Nehru's commitment.
आज हमें इस संकल्प के साथ यहाँ से जाना है कि हम उन विचारधाराओं, उन संस्थाओं और उन व्यक्तियों का मुकाबला करेंगे जो नेहरू जी के दिए उदार भारत की इमारत को तहस-नहस करना चाहते हैं.
While neither Congress President Sonia Gandhi nor Vice President Rahul Gandhi mentioned Narendra Modi, their speeches expressed the uneasiness of the party about the manner in which the government is interpreting the legacy of Nehru's colleagues and party icons Mahatma Gandhi and Vallabhbhai Patel.
एक तरफ घर की पुताई हो रही है, भैया सड़कों को साफ करो, सड़कों को साफ करो, फोटो अपॉर्चुनिटी मिल रही है, सब लोग सड़क साफ कर रहे हैं, और दूसरी तरफ जहर फैलाया जा रहा है.
Sonia described Nehru not only as the architect of modern India, but also the man who laid the foundation of India's advances in science.
उन्होंने वैज्ञानिक संस्थाओं की स्थापना की, जिनके बगैर आज हमारा चंद्रयान मार्स की परिक्रमा कहाँ संभव होती.
After its defeats in the Lok Sabha polls, the Congress seemed to be using the Nehru's birth anniversary as an occasion to rally round non-NDA parties. It has organized an international meet on 17th and 18th November, for which it has not invited Modi. Shyam Sundar's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's now take a look at what else is lined up for the day today in our segment, The Day Ahead. The 34th edition of the India International Trade Fair gets underway today in New Delhi. 25 countries are participating in the IITF this year. The theme of the fair is Women Entrepreneurs, aiming to showcase the position of the women and their status in the society as an index of its civilization. The business days will be from 14th to 18th of November, while the fair will be open for the public from November 19 to 27, 2014. The Devendra Fadnavis-led BJP government in Maharashtra may have won a trust vote by voice acclaim and also succeeded in installing a speaker of its choice, but it faces big challenges before it can even settle down. Congress MLAs will meet the governor today to demand another trust vote in the Maharashtra Assembly. Earlier, the Congress and Shiv Sena had called the trust vote illegal. National Human Rights Commission's two-day national seminar on prison reforms will conclude today. Union Home Minister Rajnath Singh will be addressing the concluding session at 4 p.m. at the India International Centre. During the two-day conference, stakeholders from across the country had reviewed the action taken reports of the state governments on the NHRC recommendation towards prison reforms. Indian Army Chief General Dalbir Singh Suhag, who is on a 4-day trip to Nepal, will visit Mustang today. He will be inspecting the Nepal Army-run high-altitude training academy. Later in the day, General Suhag will visit the Indian Pension Camp Office and the Western Command Office of Nepal Army in Pokhara. He returns to India tomorrow. The long-pending proposal of HDFC Bank to hike its overseas holding may be taken up by the Foreign Investment Promotion Board in a meeting today. Late last year, of course, HDFC Bank had approached the FIPB for increasing the foreign holding in the bank to 67.55% from 49%. Foreign entities, including FIIs, hold more than 77.36% in HDFC Limited. As per the existing norms, foreign holding in a bank cannot exceed 74%. Former Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's Sampark Yatra enters the second day today. He will be visiting Gopalganj in Bihar. The Sampark Yatra kick-started from Betia in West Champaran district and will terminate at Patna. During the 17-day Yatra covering almost 33 districts, Kumar will interact with the party workers and leaders. Moving on to some international news now. Nearly a week after he was rumoured killed, Islamic State chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has apparently surfaced alive, or at least the IS claims as much. The militant group has released an audio tape it says was recorded by al-Baghdadi. The recording, released via social media, promises what he calls volcanoes of jihad and dismissing the United States as terrified and meek. It hits out at Obama's decision to deploy added troops in Iraq. The IS leader was said to have been caught in a US-led airstrike near the Iraqi city of Mosul last week.
Our campaign against ISIL has made progress, but ISIL continues to represent a serious threat to American interests, our allies in the Middle East. As a coalition and as a nation, we must prepare for a long and difficult struggle. There will be setbacks, but we are seeing steady and sustainable progress.
Well, let's now take a look at some other news and updates from around the globe in our segment World Wrap. Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has lifted the state of emergency imposed in August to control an Ebola outbreak that has ravaged the country. She said that the move did not mean the fight is over, although numbers of new infections were no longer increasing. The confirmed death toll from the virus is now 5,160 people, almost all of them from Liberia, Guinea and Sierra Leone. The Nigerian army has recaptured the northwestern town of Mubi from militant Islamist group Boko Haram. Mubi was the biggest town under the group's control and is the first it has lost since August, when it declared a caliphate in areas it had seized. Boko Haram still controls several towns and villages in northeastern Nigeria. Thousands have been killed since it launched its insurgency in 2009. Burkina Faso's army has reached an agreement with opposition civil groups and religious leaders for a transition to civilian rule almost 2 weeks after the ouster of the president. The different factions unanimously voted in favor of a transition charter. Under the deal, an interim civilian president will be chosen by a special electoral college delegate. Oil prices fell below $75 a barrel on Thursday as US production soared to its highest in decades. Brent oil has crashed this morning to its lowest level in 4 years after the US Energy Department lowered its price forecast amid a glut of supply and weakening global demand. The drop comes as traders believe members of the OPEC oil exporting countries, which control about 40% of the world oil exports, will not cut production. Well, let's take a look now at the global stock markets. US stocks were little changed on Thursday as better than estimated results from corporate deals overshadowed losses in small caps and energy shares. Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 40.59 points or 0.23% to end the day at 17,652. Standard & Poor's 500 rose 1.08 points or 0.05% to close at 2,039. The Nasdaq Composite added 5.01 points or 0.11% to finish at 4,680. Gold prices recovered on Thursday by 250 rupees or 0.27% to 25,857 per 10 grams as speculators covered up their short positions at prevailing levels amidst pickup in demand in spot markets. Silver rose by 550 or 0.3430% to 34,800 per kilogram on Thursday after participants covered up their short positions at prevailing levels even as the metal remained weak overseas. Asian stocks dipped in early trade on Friday following fresh signs of slowing Chinese growth while crude oil hovered near a 4-year low in an oversupplied market. Japan's Nikkei is down by 63.58 points or 0.37% to 17,329 at the start of today's trading. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost 9.69 points or 0.04% to 24,010 at the start of trading. Over to some sports news now. Rohit Sharma has scripted ODI history, scoring a record-breaking 264 against Sri Lanka in the 4th ODI. That's the highest individual score by anyone in one-day cricket. What's more, Rohit also became the first player to score 2 double hundreds in a limited overs format. India's imposing total of 404 was too much for the hapless Lankans to chase down.
दिशा में उन्होंने अपने स्ट्रोक्स के लिए 18 चौके और 3 छक्के इस बात के गवाह.
Sitting up in the wicket.
It was a day when records were meant to be shattered. Returning to the squad after an injury in August, Rohit Sharma smashed his way into record books. He was even dropped very early in his innings. Since then, there was no looking back for Rohit Sharma. He took the Lankan bowlers to task for that early mistake by scoring his 5th 100 in as many balls, and then went on to score his 2nd double 100 in the ODI format. He's the first player to achieve the feat twice, surpassing Sachin Tendulkar and Virender Sehwag. The highest individual score was not too far, and Rohit Sharma made sure he returned with his hands full. Launching boundaries and sixes regularly, he soon went past Sehwag's record of 219. His innings was so outrageous that the first 100 runs, which were hit at a runner ball, seemed like a humdrum in comparison to the 164 runs that followed. He finally ended with a score of 264 and 173 balls. He went in the last ball of the match. By then, India had reached 404 for 5. He was given a guard of honour when he walked off the Eden Gardens. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Let's now bring you up to date with the other stories from the sports arena in our latest sports beat. FC Goa got their act together after a couple of winless outings as they handed Delhi Dynamos an embarrassing 4-1 defeat in an Indian Super League encounter on Thursday. The victory couldn't have come at a better time as it kept them in the reckoning for a semi-final berth in the cash-rich league. London Olympic bronze medalist Saina Nehwal and top Indian male shuttlers Parupalli Kashyap and K. Srikanth entered the quarterfinals of the China Open Super Series premiere after posting contrasting wins in their respective second-round matches on Thursday. Saina got the better of Qin Jinping of China 21-18, 21-18 in a 43-minute contest in the women's singles match. Both male shuttlers, however, had to fight hard for their wins against Chinese opponents. Defending champion India got a flying start in the South Asian Football Federation Women's Championship, thrashing Maldives 8-0. The Group A encounter was played in Islamabad, Pakistan on Thursday. 4 goals from striker Bala Devi, 2 from Kamala Devi, while Bembem and Jyoti meant the defending champions made a solid start to their SAF Championship campaign. India next play Bangladesh on Saturday. Vishwanathan Anand is sitting pretty ahead of the 5th game of the World Chess Championship against Magnus Carlsen to be played today. Anand will again play with white pieces with 1 victory, 1 loss and 2 draws. The match is currently tied at 2 apiece. As per the match schedule, there is a rest day after every 2 games and that break changed things around for Anand. And Finally, the film Garam Hawa, hailed as one of the finest feature films on the travails of India and Pakistan partition, is being re-released in cinemas across India today, 4 decades after the original release. We leave you with glimpses of the classic. Have a nice day.
आज किसे छोड़ा है भैया? बड़ी बहन को। बहनोई साहब तो पहले ही कराची जा चुके थे। आज उनके बाल बच्चे भी चले।